Our next speaker is also a PhD researcher from the University College London. You already met him at the panel discussion here for a little while. He studies developmental neuroscience and psychopathologies, and he's also certified cognitive behavioral hypnotherapist. Please welcome Max Crosland-Wood.
So hello everyone. So yeah, I'm going to be sharing a bit of research that me and my team have been conducting. We're called Onaya Science. We're an independent research team, but we have affiliations with a few different universities: Melbourne University, Yale University, Peru University as well, where we get our ethics and various sources of funding. So this is like about an hour of content I'm going to squeeze into 15 minutes. I might have to just do it in a fast version, so forgive me if I kind of brush through complicated concepts. Essentially, I'm just going to lay the foundations of where we're at with psychiatry today. Then we'll go into why we do what we do as Onaya Science. And then I'll be sharing a snippet of an ongoing study we're doing with military veterans, where we bring them to the jungle and they undergo Ayahuasca treatment within a Shipibo context. So we don't change how they do what they do. We respect that they've been doing this for a long time. We simply bring science to the jungle and offer that perspective. So, current state of psychiatry. Why is that being weird? How come there's no diagrams? Okay, so there's a lot of diagrams on there that are not there, so I'm just going to have to speak it. So essentially what I was illustrating with really beautiful diagrams that I spent a long time making was that the current state of psychiatry is at a bit of a crossroad when it comes to treating mental suffering, in the sense that we have a rising rate of people reporting they need help. We have this occurring at younger ages. Oh, yeah. And sure, we have an improvement in diagnostic tools and mental health awareness, so that's going to contribute to this rise. But it doesn't take away the fact that a lot of people are taking these pharmaceuticals and not getting better. There's this general systemic dissatisfaction, both in the users, but also in the psychiatrists. So we've got to a point now where the caseload for psychiatrists is so high that psychiatrists are now having to refuse patients. And there's been some alarming statistics coming out recently. One particularly, there was a population study in the US that asked a load of psychiatrists, how much do you believe you can meet the demands of your patients at the moment? And 46% believed that they could not meet the demands of their patients. So this really speaks of this systemic dissatisfaction, both on the user and also on the healthcare providers. Now, psychedelics have come along during this process, this kind of crisis that we're in. And psychedelics really offer some innovation in how we do things in terms of treating mental health. In the sense that, so conventional psychiatry operates within the biomedical model. We alleviate mental suffering from the bottom up through fixing an imbalance of chemicals. So it's very much weighted on the drug. Whereas psychedelics, we now know it's biorelational, right? It's unsafe to take these without the relational container, which is made up of trust and care and attention. So it's birelational in nature. We then have a shift from the focus of symptom management and functionality, which is essential for people who really need help, right? I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that, but for a lot of people, they want more than that, right? And so psychedelics appear to go a step further in the sense of helping people generate a degree of meaning and insight into why they're suffering in the first place. We then have a shift from the role the user has in the healing process. So conventional psychiatry, a lot of the healing, supposed healing, is in the drug, right? So you take the drug on a daily basis or however long you're meant to be taking it, and you haven't really got much agency in that as long as you adhere to the regime. Whereas with psychedelics, there's very much more of an active role demanded of the patient. They have to come with intention, they have to come with commitment, they have to come with that perseverance through navigating sometimes very uncomfortable experiences. And there was more, but I haven't got the thing, so I can't actually remember. But what I'm trying to illustrate here is that psychedelics have come into the field of psychiatry and really demanded a holistic approach, in the sense that we need the interpersonal, so that's without question. The interpersonal is essential for the safety and efficacy of these treatments. They're also somatic, so I was really happy to hear, I think it was Jack, who I don't think is here at the moment, he brought to question the relevance of the somatic. And I think, the term psychedelic is somewhat problematic in the sense that it means mind manifesting, but psychedelics, particularly at high doses, are deeply somatic as well. They manifest somatically. And that is becoming more acknowledged in the mainstream. Now we're seeing a lot more somatic therapists coming onto these clinical trials to help. We then have, suddenly, we're decorating hospital rooms. Suddenly aesthetics is a valuable asset to the treatment success. What that looks like is still we're working out, but suddenly we're decorating these hospital rooms to make them more conducive to positive experiences. We're bringing in elements of nature into it, whether it's photos of nature or actually bringing in plants. So this brings it into the ecological element as well that's relevant within psychedelic treatments. I'm sure anyone who has tried psychedelics can understand where I'm coming from when I say that there's nature-based settings seem to be quite conducive to psychedelics as opposed to being in a tight, confined space. And it's bidirectional, and this is emerging in the literature at the moment, where people are also reporting an increase in ecological awareness after they take psychedelics, both in natural settings but also in clinical settings, which is quite interesting. And this is sustained 6 months and beyond, and also related to how well they do in their treatments. So now suddenly we're bringing into question the role of nature-relatedness and mental health. And then we have the spiritual domain. So this is potentially one of the most complicated and profound aspects of psychedelics that's really shaken psychiatry up, these kind of mystical and ineffable experiences where people describe godlike experiences, and these seem to not just be woo-woo, but very clinically meaningful to the efficacy of the treatment. So suddenly we have to bring in the role of spirituality, whatever that might look like. So this holistic demand that psychedelics require kind of springboards me onto Onaya Science. This is the center where we work in the heart of the Peruvian Amazon. It's a really beautiful center right on the water. We have it's a retreat center, so all year round we have people coming and going, and then we also have a research center connected to it. And we're a very multidisciplinary team. We're psychologists like myself, we're psychiatrists, we're clinical psychologists, we're biologists, we also have neuroscientists on the team, but most importantly we have a team of indigenous healers, and they are really at the heart of this work. We have a very deep collaboration with the healers, and we have an indigenous advisory board that informs our work. Everything we do is discussed amongst them. They bring ideas to us. A lot of our papers have been direct influences from what they want to provide science for. Who's drunk ayahuasca before? How many people have drunk? Okay, I'm going to quickly just illustrate what ayahuasca is, just in case people don't know. It's 2 plants. Won't go into too much detail due to time. But what's important to know is 2 plants are brewed together. You have the vine, which contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, has mild psychoactive effects and antidepressant effects. That's combined with the chacruna leaf, which has the DMT in it. You ingest that, you have a profound experience, 4 to 8 hours. But what's important to note is ayahuasca, there's a degree of complexity in the composition of how it's made, and that can produce a variety of different effects. So in the context we work in, there's a method behind, so they typically have 5 ceremonies over 10 days, and there's a method behind the composition of brew. And so typically it begins with more heavy on the vine and less on the leaf, the DMT, and that's said to have more of a somatic and purgative effect. And they believe that's a detoxification of the body. And then they go into bringing more of the DMT heavy brew in, and that they regard as bringing the light into the experience. That brings on the visionary experiences. And so this is just to illustrate that ayahuasca there's a degree of complexity to what we regard as ayahuasca. And then yeah, it's been used for pretty long. We don't really know how long. We have pretty ancient archaeological evidence. Can't say whether it was used in the context we're using today, but what we can say is about 150 years ago, more or less, we do have documented evidence of Westerners sitting in these ceremonies for the intention of healing. There's also a dark side to ayahuasca, which I'd love to get into, but I can't. But it's important to know that it's not just used for positive intent, it's also used for bad intent as well, manipulation and other things. So, wow, 5 minutes, okay. So the design of our ceremonies, group-based, as I kind of mentioned on the panel. There's a preparation process, so they go through dietary and behavioral restrictions. So they're reducing all the kind of dopaminergic pleasures that we all love, right? Salt, fat, sugar, sex, technology, social media, drugs. You really want to reduce that, detox your body from that for at least a few weeks before you engage in this. And the idea behind this is you're kind of resetting the nervous system to more subtle energies, and you're during this, what it feels like is you can be pretty irritated, and it can be quite uncomfortable during that preparation process. But there's a reason behind that, because you're allowing, when you reduce all those simple pleasures, that kind of like dopamine button that you always press when you feel a degree of discomfort or trigger of psycho-emotional stuff is coming up to the surface, you can easily bring it back down with all those cheap thrills or pleasures or whatever. So you reduce that, and suddenly all of this kind of unconscious material begins to surface. And then they believe that by the time they go into the ceremonies, it's more accessible for them to work through with the medicine. If they don't do this process, it might just mean they will go through more of a purgative process before they can get to that. So it's, group participation, healer drinks as well. There's a lot to be said on that. Don't have time, I'm afraid. The songs are also fascinating. So the songs are one of the most important elements of the healing in their tradition, in the Shipibo tradition, and they're very technical. Each song has specific melodies for specific purposes. And this is something, if you're interested, I encourage you to ask me about it afterwards, because, there's a lot to be said on that. And then, just a quick thing on the purging. The purging isn't just like you're purging from eating a bad meal or food poisoning. There's a lot that's going on. So there's a lot of psycho-emotional processing that people experience when they purge. And often when you ask someone, what were you purging, they will have a degree of understanding behind what that is. And often it's something like purging memories or shame or guilt or addictive patterns. And they really feel like there's some sense of like releasing it out. So still lots of research we need to do on that. Okay, so just a quick snapshot. We've been running for about over 10 years, and this is kind of all the research we've done so far, more or less. We were the first study to actually find the expression of DNA changes after ayahuasca. So we've been doing a range of biological measures, blood samples, stool samples for the microbiome, EEG, and we did a little pilot study, and we basically found, there was a significant change in the sigma R1, sigma receptor 1 increase in DNA methylation, which indicated a turning down of that gene afterwards. So now we're doing a full genome analysis with UCL genomics with the veterans. And yes, so to go on to the study now, I won't show that video, which is a shame. So, quick snapshot of the study. It's ongoing, and our target is about 210 veterans by the end of 2027. For now, I'm just going to give you a sneak peek of 40 veterans that we've done an analysis for. The results I'm going to show you are very preliminary. We haven't published, they haven't been peer-reviewed, so just take that into consideration, but we just wanted to give an illustration of what we're finding so far. So PTSD, they all had PTSD to come on the study, and we found 6 months later there was a significant drop in PTSD below clinical threshold, and over 80% were in remission 6 months later. So promising so far. In terms of depression and anxiety, we again found similar promising results. Warrants continuing the research to see what we find in the final study. Impulsivity and life satisfaction. So Impulsivity is an interesting one. We actually just published a paper on ADHD. We found that a lot of people who come through our program who also have ADHD were reporting some kind of alleviation of those ADHD symptoms. And we actually found that it was specifically impulsivity that seems to alleviate and be sustained. So the EEG results. So essentially what we found here was there was an increase in the gamma band. That's those fast, very fast frequencies. And we also found a reduction in the theta and the beta bands, which maybe could illustrate the kind of reduction of emotional reactivity we're seeing afterwards. And then for the alpha, there was kind of more variability, some increased, some decreased afterwards. And one interpretation of that could be the alpha rebound effect, which is something you see in PTSD treatment where it kind of goes below baseline and then bounces back up. So that could be indicating that. Okay, so I'm just going to skip to a real story because, I mean, data's great. We all love data. But I think what is really bringing this work to life is the stories of people that go through our program. So Brock was a military veteran who came on our program in September, and he was involved in major operations, including the one to take down Saddam Hussein. He experienced a lot of trauma in the military, but also a lot of trauma in childhood. This is something we see a lot with these veterans. They think they're coming to heal combat trauma, but then it takes them way down the line to childhood. And the reason I'm sharing his story is because he highlights two themes. I'll probably only have time to share one of those themes, which is grief, but it's grief and forgiveness. So ceremony 3 for Brock, he had a complete ego dissolution. So sense of self completely went away. And often this can be quite frightening for people, but for Brock, when this happened, he was absolutely convinced he had died. This was it. He had gone. His sense of self was inactive. He didn't know who he was, where he was. There was just nothingness, and all there was in that nothingness was this intense sense of peace, intense sense of pleasure, love, compassion that he'd never really experienced before. And hours went by, and he was just in this experience, enjoying it, and then eventually, as the ego dissolution started to fade, his sense of self started to reconstruct, and eventually he was like, oh, my name's Brock, oh, I'm in the jungle, I drank ayahuasca, and it all starts coming back online. And in this process of him coming back too, he was met with all these flashing images, these memories of all his friends that he never got to say goodbye to, all his friends that he'd lost in the army, and particularly all his friends that had lost their life due to the aftermath of PTSD afterwards. The suicide rates are extremely high when people leave the military. And he didn't realize how much grief he was holding on to. And so in this moment, he suddenly was met with all these memories of all these people he had lost. And because he had just come from a place where he was absolutely convinced he had died and this was where he went, in that moment, he began to enter into a process which, to me, sounds like a process of processing grief, where he started to reorganize the loss of his friends to a gain of they've just been liberated and freed into that place that I just was in. And that place is far better than the place they were in before that. And in that moment, the floodgates opened, and he cried for the first time in over 10 years, he said. And he cried for hours and hours and hours, all through the end of the ceremony. And yeah, the next day during breakfast, he shared all this to me, and he just said, I had no idea I had all of that. And he was expressing how much lighter he felt, and he felt like it was the first time we actually got to say goodbye to all those he lost. And this is just, one particular story, but there's a common theme in this that I see a lot with these veterans. Similar with forgiveness. Do I have to stop? Okay.
We have only 2 minutes for questions.
Okay, we'll stop there. But wait, quickly. So I'd love to finish with, this is one of the healers we work with, and I'd love to leave with her words, but I don't think the sound works. But essentially the question, so I did an interview with one of the healers, and I asked her, what kind of advice would you give to people who are not from your culture, people like us, if we are curious about the way they work and everything, how to approach that with integrity and respect. And she was like, as long as the respect is there, as long as you're crystal clear why you're doing it and what you're doing, and it's in line with the way they work and everything, in terms of just respecting the medicine, not treating it like something you just want to have an experience from, but rather acknowledging the depth behind their belief around ayahuasca. And then, now I'll leave it there for now. You can feel free to pick my brains after and I can elaborate on it all, but yeah. And then, this is some of our team. You can see there's a wider team involved, but at least for this study, we've just put us, and so it's very multidisciplinary. We are also, the psychiatrist and the clinical psychologist, and I'm about to begin. They're 5 years into their shamanic training, so they're actually juggling both worlds. They're psychiatrists and clinical psychologists. They kind of went through the system to play the game. They got their titles and the paperwork and all that, and now they're training in the jungle because they see that there's something very powerful in their approach that is missed in the psychiatric approach. And I have just followed suit, but I'm very much a baby when it comes to that kind of stuff. Okay, questions?
We have time for one question.
Thank you so much. First of all, for mentioning the veterans. I think it's very important that this community is acknowledged on events like this symposium, because in the United States they are one of the most active communities in fighting for people's rights to legally use psychedelics. However, my question will regard these relationships with other cultures. And first of all, I thought that I would ask you about some basic guidelines for people coming from the so-called West to places like the Amazon basin on how to behave, how to interact with people over there. But I thought maybe better approach would be to ask you maybe for some anecdote or a story from your own experience that would somehow tell us something important in that regard. Thank you.
Maybe like a short phrase that sounds like something really interesting for maybe a more personal discussion later.
Did I understand your question correctly? Are you asking, like, with the whole influx of Westerners going to South America to experience these medicines, what are the implications of that? Or
what's your personal experience with interacting with these cultures, and
Yeah.
maybe some advice for people who also want to follow your steps?
Yeah. It's complicated. I don't really like the whole ayahuasca tourism thing. I really think there's a lot of problems that are manifested due to Westerners going over to these places, and it's changed the places a lot. Like I work in near a town called Iquitos, which is like the hub of ayahuasca tourism, and it's very problematic, to be honest, and it's unregulated, and it's quite frankly unsafe if you don't know where you're looking or where you're going. Like, fortunately with us, we've been building a relationship with a very specific lineage, a very specific family lineage. So we only work with this specific family, and we've been building this relationship over 10 years. Now, there's a lot of romanticism around sitting with Indigenous people, and because, these Indigenous people, that sometimes I think we romanticize this idea, and in reality that these people, there's a lot of trauma in these societies, right? There's a lot of, they're not perfect people. And I think at the moment it's a shame that we don't have the infrastructures that are more local for people to be able to gain access to these treatments in a safe way. And that's driving everyone to have to travel to South America to experience these things, right? But, it's problematic, I think. But sorry.
Maybe we can wrap up with this. If I can add just in one word, perhaps when going to places like this, and not that I've personally experienced that, but I would imagine it's always good to arrive with a good degree of humility and openness, and listen maybe more than act. Thank you, Max, very much for a fascinating talk about your project.